In a minute, but right now, let's get to our guest.
Here's the bottom line.
Here's the bottom line.
We need to get to the bottom of this.
Get to the bottom of this.
We've got to get to the bottom of this.
The bottom line on the Marc Show.
That's the only way we're going to get to the bottom of this.
That's the bottom line.
Truth! You can't handle the truth.
All right, we are joined today by a new guest, Brian Wahby, joining us. I know at one time he was the head of the Democratic Party down here in the city. Am I correct about that, Brian?
That is correct. Many years ago.
These days you wear many hats.
I wear many hats. I do indeed.
Mardi Gras hats and all.
I have many heads, and I wear many hats.
Well, we're thrilled to get you in here today, and thank you for giving us a little bit of your time. You know, I was describing to you the reason I do this segment on Thursdays is, I like to talk to people who disagree with me on issues and pick their brains and have debates about it. Usually it's about news of the day.
Right.
There's really no bigger news today than this shooting down in Parkland, Florida. What I've discovered is what I've discovered after Newtown and after San Bernardino and after the church shooting is there's an immediate call normally, starts on the left, starts in the CNNs of the world and MSNBC's demanding changes in gun laws.
Right.
What's your take on that?
And those quickly are replaced by thoughts and prayers, which always are great to do. I mean, I think thoughts and prayers are wonderful. They just don't stop bullets. Look, I think you when you introduced me, you talked about how sometimes you want to bring people in with different ideas so we can have a debate. I don't think we need a debate. We have had too many debates, and they get bogged down in just small little details that people want to argue about. We need to have a dialogue in this community, in this country. We have witnessed yesterday, just the most recent mass shooting, and now we call them mass casualty events. This morning I was talking to my wife, and the thought of kids going to school and having to have a drill for a mass shooting. They drill. Like when we were kids, there was a tornado drill. You rang the thing and everybody went outside and stood in line. They do that now. Our kids have to do that now. I'm sorry, that's not the country I want to live in. I can assure you, even my friends on the right don't want to live in that country either. And we don't want to live in a country where where crazy people can get guns and kill people indiscriminately. I'm involved in one of my businesses is a festival production business, and I watched with pain what happened in Las Vegas.
In Vegas, right?
Forget the human cost of that, which was absolutely abhorrent. But I mean, from my business standpoint, that requires me to have substantially more insurance.
Oh, sure.
I mean,
does.
it's and I want my guests to have a good time when they come to the party. I mean, people don't come to festivals to have a bad time. They certainly don't come expecting to get killed.
Now you're in a situation where you have to look at that situation in Vegas. He chose to shoot from a high position down into a crowd of people indiscriminately. What if he had driven a van into the middle of that concert area and blown it up?
Well, actually,
there are lots of security concerns regarding any large gathering of people like that, right?
Sure, and large gatherings of people are a target, unfortunately. But so we have to do is we've got to figure out who has the proclivity to do something bad and make sure that they don't have the arms to do it. And I think the conversation about gun control, which I know you talked about earlier today, because I listened to you this afternoon on the way here. We have to have a conversation. There's got to be some way to remedy this. And I got to tell you, my reading of the Second Amendment refers to the right to bear arms should not be infringed upon. But there's that whole first clause about a well-regulated militia. I don't think, and I can only imagine, that the framers had the idea that AK-47s and AR-15s were even going to be available. They were talking about muskets.
But that was the weapon of war then.
Well, right, but
the point is, an AR-15 is not a weapon of war. I hear that all the time. I hear it.
What do you mean? Why is it not a weapon of war?
It's not a weapon of war because it's not an M4. It's not a fully automatic weapon. The U.S. Army does not use AR-15s. They use M4 fully automatic weapons. They don't use a single-shot semi-automatic weapon. They don't.
All right.
And they haven't in years. I mean, I've got an M1 Garand from World War II,
yeah, I got a carbine.
and it had a 7 or 8 shot clip in it,
Yep.
but it was one trigger pull, one shot.
Right.
So it's no different than a lot of hunting rifles that are semi-automatic or shotguns that are semi-automatic.
Right.
Ultimately, put in the wrong hands, it's dangerous. But so are cars.
Should we regulate? Well, I mean, should it be regulated?
Well, it is regulated.
In which way?
Well, I mean, what more can you do with background checks? Take the situation in Texas, for example. The law would have worked except for the fact that the military didn't follow the law and report this guy's background to the ATF before he got out of the military. Right. Now I understand they followed up and they've added an additional 4,000 people to the list of people who aren't eligible to have firearms. So if we enforce the laws we have on the books, we stop a lot of this problem. The other dialogue we need to have is about mental health.
I agree.
That's a little bit of a slippery slope, in my opinion. Who gets to appoint the panel of people that looks at you or looks at me and decides?
We do. We do. Our government gets to.
You were on Ritalin, or you had post-traumatic stress disorder 20 years ago, so you're no longer eligible to have a firearm.
Well, look, we have a constitution. We all got together 254 years ago, whenever it was, 240 years ago, and we agreed as a people that we're going to have certain rules, and we're going to have certain ways to remedy disputes, and we're going to call that government. And we have that government still. So let's let the government, which represents us, let them make a decision. And if they make it wrong, then let's throw them out. But we've got to do something. We can't just as I go back to what I started with, thoughts and prayers don't stop bullets. And we've got to have a conversation about how we fix these problems.
Well, I mean, I get back to Timothy McVeigh. He was no brain surgeon. I covered the Oklahoma City bombing, the aftermath of it. He just went to a bunch of different feed stores and bought enough fertilizer to decimate the front of a federal building. Nobody expected it. How do you plan for it? I mean, if a crazy person wants to do something like that, they're going to find a way to do it. So whether this guy was able to get his hands on an AR-15 or several handguns he still could have killed a lot of people. Earlier today, I don't expect that you got to see this or hear it, but in the first hour today, I talked about the fact that school security is something we need to look at. A lot of these situations in schools are being hit because they're soft targets. There's no doubt about it. They're not going to a military installation. They're not going to a police station. They're going to a school, which is a gun-free zone. I would support schools stepping up their security. Now, that doesn't mean every teacher has a gun. That doesn't mean any of that. But you can restrict access.
You want to pay for it?
Well, that's the point.
I mean, everyone wants to pay. Everyone says, we should have to pay taxes. It's terrible.
No.
Let's cut taxes. Well, the reality is certain things cost money.
Sure.
And if we're going to have, and I'm not opposed to the idea of having security guards, armed guards in schools. I mean, I don't think it doesn't certainly make me feel warm and fuzzy. And, I'm a liberal, so I got to feel warm and fuzzy. But if it's going to protect people, yeah. But we have to pay for it. So folks got to pay taxes for these things.
Well, I don't think anybody denies. I mean, look in the city schools in St. Louis. I've covered this story before at Sumner and some of the other schools. I remember when it was controversial when they put in metal detectors, but they were having a problem with people bringing guns to school, and they had to figure out a way around that. You don't find metal detectors in the Parkway School District for the most that I'm aware of, or the Rockwood School District, or some of the other Hazelwood School Districts that I'm aware of. I don't know that they have metal detectors because people are uncomfortable with that. But ultimately, it's something school boards are going to have a hard conversation with, and I don't doubt that it's going to cost some money. A lot of them have resource officers already. Well, why not have somebody on property that has the ability to shoot back in the instance that somebody gets into that school?
Hopefully you can stop them before that. I think there are lots. There are other, and I don't know this, but I assume this based on my career. I think there are steps you can take that don't require an armed guard at the school that can prevent at least, maybe not prevent, but at least mitigate the impact of a shooter. like securing the doors, and I think a lot of schools are doing that now. But I mean, I think it's time for us to really have a real discussion about what the rules ought to be around guns. And
Brian Wahby is my guest. Do you support the assault weapons ban?
Look, I enjoy hunting. I have a farm in Pulaski County that I try to harvest deers from every fall, and I have a better chance of harvesting a beer than a deer. But
that's usually my experience.
Yeah. I guess the question is, what is an assault weapon?
That was going to be my next question.
And then honestly, there are so many weapons out there now that what does a ban do? Well, so we stop the supply now, and everything that's in circulation stays in circulation, or does a ban require us to seize those weapons in some way?
That'd be a revolt.
I think people, I think, would have a lot of problems there. I will say the folks in Australia or New Zealand was Australia. Yeah, they just said we're not going to do it.
Confiscated.
They confiscated, and now they didn't have a Second Amendment to their Constitution. They didn't have anything enshrined in their founding document that said you got a right to bear arms. I do think that we should have a conversation about the Second Amendment, though. We have to look at that first clause,
but that just like Roe versus Wade, just like gay marriage, that is a settled issue. The Supreme Court has ruled on those issues, right?
Right. But
as much as I would like to see Roe versus Wade overturned, personally,
right,
it's the law of the land. I mean, I accept that.
But I think we can have a conversation about redefining what the Second Amendment does. I mean, there are limits to the First Amendment. There are limits to every amendment.
Yeah.
I don't think the Second Amendment should be sacrosanct. It should be the Constitution is a living, breathing document. Has been for 240 years or whatever the number is. My math's bad. And I think that we've got to continue to constantly improve our system. And that may require some changes to the Second Amendment.
See, we could take a whole segment for that, because I think if you go back and you read the Federalist Papers and you look at the intent of the men who wrote that document, they knew exactly why they put the Second Amendment. They put it in there for a reason.
To protect against tyranny.
To protect against tyranny, and I don't think that they intended anything other than the fact that if you want to own a weapon, you ought to be able to own a weapon, because someday you may have to use it. They lived that.
But they couldn't fathom the weapons that we have.
They couldn't fathom. They probably couldn't.
They couldn't fathom this phone.
But you would agree that the court also ruled that there could be reasonable limits on gun ownership, and a lot of states have imposed those.
Right.
So, I don't know. Brian, I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
We've run up against it. Love to have you on again sometime.
Give me a call.
You bet. Brian Wahby, thanks for your time. 314-969-9797. I'm going to get some more of your phone calls here coming up. We're also going to talk to Jeff Clayton from the American Bail Coalition on whether or not it makes sense to get rid of the bail system. It's all coming up on the Marc Cox Show.
Marc Cox Show on FM News Talk 97.1, 98.7, AM 1490,